Everybody, we're back with some more proof for the Bible. Today we're going to do prophecy. The first video on prophecy is probably going to take me a few videos to get through this because there's a lot of prophecy that has been fulfilled, and we're only going to just dip the tip of our finger into that lake of prophecy and check it out. This is what really did it for me, I think, pushing me over the edge to believe that there's undoubtedly a God when he can prove what the future is going to be, or when he can predict what the future is going to be with 100% accuracy, like down to the detail. It really, I think this is the best proof in the whole Bible for the reality of the Bible itself and for God. God even makes this statement. He invites all the other little g gods, and I say little g because he's the only God, right? There is no other gods, but there is principalities and dark powers out there. When the third of the angels fell from heaven, there's still influences on this earth, and they've been influences in the past and made people worship them, and they're still out there today. So they try to convince people to worship them, but God invites all these other little g gods. If you guys can tell the future, then maybe you're God. So why don't you try to tell the future? And they can't do it. And they don't even try because there's no possible way. Baal and Moloch are examples of these gods. People used to sacrifice children to them. They used to worship them. They thought they would bring them profit, and it was just really evil what they had to do to worship these people. And then they had all their temple worship sites where they had temple prostitutes and stuff. They added that in, and they're not on the same level with God. Satan's not on the same level with God either. He's still God's angel. He's still a created being, and God has him on a leash, and he won't let him go beyond what he allows. The devil still has to ask permission. No other religious book has ever had accurate predictions. There's some books that have had predictions, but nothing has ever been accurate. And like if you look at the Book of Mormon, it talks about cities and mountains that never existed. Everything in our Bible has been, though, and with the more time that goes on, different sites and places keep being proven. I think everybody has a time of skepticism, and we question what we can't see, and I believe that's okay, because if you weren't skeptical and you didn't question things and you just blindly believed, you might end up blindly believing the wrong thing. And I think God created us with that sense of we have to have some kind of proof. So he uses this, and he even says that in the Bible, that he uses the fact that he can predict the future. Prophecy is accelerating in our times today. If you pay attention to the news over in Israel, and I say the news in Israel because Israel is the centerpiece, the timepiece of God's prophecy. Most prophecies that you read about are going to be centered around something to do with Israel, or somebody fighting Israel, something happening over there. Like in 1948, when Israel came back to be a nation, they hadn't been a nation since 70 AD, and they came back to be a nation. Well, that was a prophecy centered around Israel, and then it talks about how they would take over this desert area, because Israel was just a desert nobody wanted when they took it over, and now they've made it into an amazing oasis with farmlands, and they produce more water there than they can actually use, and they give other people some of their water. They got the best fruit and the best roses, I think. The best fruit because there's actually salt content in their soil, and the fruit actually thinks something's about to go wrong, so it tries to get as big as it can, as fast as it can, for the future generation seeds that are in it. So anyway, pretty interesting pretty interesting stuff, but the Bible said all that was going to happen with 100% accuracy. Isaiah 42:9 says, "Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them." This is God speaking, right? Through Isaiah. He's one of the prophets. I was telling you, was one of the bigger mouthpieces that directly tells us what God is telling him. And the minor prophets aren't less of prophets, they just have less content. So they're shorter books. There's minor and major prophets, but Isaiah is one of the major prophets. So far, over 2,000 prophecies have come true, and we see how many more are coming. So the first prophecy I'll tell you about is about the rise and fall of nations. It was given in a dream to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful ruler of Babylon, and Daniel was a Jewish person that was basically captive in Babylon, but they respected him very much, and he kind of worked for him. And anyway, the king had a dream, and he told him, "I want to know what my dream was, and I want you to tell me what it means." And everybody was like, "There's no way. Nobody could tell you what your dream was except you. And just tell us what it is and we'll tell you what it means." And he's like, "You guys are all dead. I'm gonna have all you guys wiped out if you don't tell me by tomorrow." And Daniel heard about this, and he went to the king, and he's like, "Hey, just give me one day, and I got to pray on this." He's like, "I couldn't tell you what your dream is," but he said, "There's a God in heaven that can, because he gave you that dream." He said, "Just give me a chance. I'll pray to my God, and just let me try to come to you tomorrow and tell you." So Daniel went and he prayed about it. And in Daniel 2, verse 36 through 45, is this dream that he had in the explanation of nations. Anyway, Daniel prayed. Like I said, he went and prayed. God told him what the dream was. So it was a dream about a statue, and every segment of the statue was a different kind of material, which represented a different nation. And he told Nebuchadnezzar, "The head of this statue is gold, and you're the head because you're the most powerful nation." And then he told about the second nation, which would become Medo-Persia later, the third, which became Greece, and the fourth, which was the Roman Empire, which will be revived in the end days. The skeptics agree that this prophecy is amazingly accurate. Some say that it must have been written later because they don't know how to explain it. But they've even tested the ink that this was written on, and they know what eras, what certain dates the certain inks came from because of the materials they had around. They know for a fact when this thing was written, and it was way before all those others. It was definitely written in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Another prophecy, the second prophecy I wrote about, was in the book of Nahum. It said that the city of Nineveh would be overthrown easily. It would be permanently destroyed by fire, and it was easily captured because officers would desert and they would be drunk in their final hours. An archaeologist found a layer of ash in the ruins, proving that the destruction was by fire. Babylonian records show that it was an easy victory where the officers did flee. Another Greek historian wrote that the king gave much wine to the soldiers that night before they overtook Nineveh. So, how could you get so perfectly accurate with a prophecy that is recorded by secular people? These historians are secular. Some of them, not necessarily all these people are Christian. So a lot of them are just skeptical, but they dig these things up, and it starts proving the Bible more and more. Isaiah 47:1, 13, Isaiah 13:17 through 20, and Isaiah 14:23 all predict the fall of Babylon. 200 years before it even happened, it said Babylon would be attacked and overthrown by the Medes. Their gates would open for a man named Cyrus, and they would be reduced to swampland. We know from history that the Medes and the Persians combined forces and defeated Babylon by the command of Cyrus. Well, when this prophecy was written about Cyrus, he hadn't even been born yet. Remember, this was 200 years in advance. So I'll just read one of the passages that I mentioned about the overthrow of Babylon, and then I'll read you the one about Cyrus. So Isaiah 13:17, starting at 17. See, I will stir up against them the Medes, 200 years before. This is God speaking through Isaiah, who don't care for silver and have no delight in gold. Their bows will strike down the young men. They will have no mercy on infants or look with compassion on children. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians, will be overthrown by God. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, she will never be inhabited or lived in through all the generations. So Saddam Hussein, I don't know if you guys remember, back in the 80s, I think it was, he tried to rebuild Babylon, and he started to, and he's got some buildings, but nobody actually lives there. That's pretty amazing that he said that it would never be inhabited again, and it still hasn't been. It's, I think, like 60 miles south of Iraq, if I'm right, is where Babylon's located, and they started to build it, but nobody lives there. I'm not sure why they quit the building project, but I guess because God said it wouldn't be inhabited, he's not going to let it happen. Okay, this is the amazing prophecy about Cyrus. I told you the Medes would come led by a man named Cyrus way before he was born, calls him out by name, and this is where he does it. Isaiah, the very end of 44, it's 44:28. Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and will accomplish all that I please? He will say to Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him, to strip kings of their armor, to open doors before him so the gates won't be shut. I go before you. I will level mountains. I will break gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. So that's pretty awesome. He just laid it out right there. Cyrus was going to take care of business, and Cyrus wasn't even born yet. It wasn't even a twinkle in his dad's eye yet. Alexander the Great tried to rebuild Babylon before his death as well as Saddam Hussein, but nobody who's ever undertaken the project has made it happen, and nobody lives there. Okay, the next prophecy. God commanded in Leviticus 25:2 that the Israelites give the land a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath of years. So every seventh year, they need to let their land rest. And they wouldn't listen to God. They were like, no, we're just going to go ahead and keep on growing all our stuff and doing our own thing. We're making good money here. And anyway, God commanded that they not plant anything on the Sabbath year. And he said the land needed the rest too, but they wouldn't listen to him. It was mostly a test of their faith and obedience, just like the manna in the desert. So I don't know if you know the story of when Moses took everybody, all the Israelites through the desert for 40 years, and the food that they had would just show up in the morning. It was manna from heaven, and it was some kind of bread, and it would just be there. And he said, don't gather any on the seventh day. On the Sabbath day, I want you to rest. So on Friday, because Sabbath is Saturday, he said on Friday, gather twice as much, and then you'll have some to eat on Saturday. Well, they thought maybe they didn't quite trust God, so they gathered a little bit extra on some of the other days to see, and it would be full of maggots by the next day. But when they gathered on Friday, God provided. It all stayed good in their jars until Saturday. God promised that he would make the harvest in 6 years so abundant they wouldn't need to work it on the seventh year. So he promised provision for them if they would just trust him. God told them in Leviticus that if they disobeyed, that he would scatter them to other nations and let them be overthrown by their enemies. It wasn't just the fact that they didn't give their land Sabbaths. They also had a lot of idol worship and child sacrifice going on. But the land would become desolate long enough to get its Sabbaths back. The time that they disobeyed was for 490 years. So every seventh year out of the 490, there would be 70 years that they should have let their land rest, and they didn't. So God allowed Babylon to come in and overthrow them, as was predicted by, prophesied by Jeremiah. He told them that this was going to happen. God told them to warn them, but they didn't want to hear it. They were mean to Jeremiah when he tried to tell them that. But in Ezra, after 70 years, God caused King Cyrus to let the people of Israel go back home. And he even sent all the gold and silver back with him that Nebuchadnezzar took. This was after the 70 years that God got back for the land's rest. So that's pretty amazing that God put it on Cyrus's heart to give everything back that was stolen from the temple, and to send the people back to go rebuild the temple. We might have time for one more. I don't know how long this has gone. I got a bunch of prophecies, so I'm just going to go through as many as you'll listen to, I guess. And I'll probably do this one more. Ezekiel 26 and Amos 1, 9 through 10, predicted that the city of Tyre would be attacked. There's two cities of Tyre, but it's pretty easy to find out about this one Tyre. It would be attacked by many nations. Stones, timber, and even soil would be thrown into the sea, and the remains of the city would be used to spread fishing nets on. So Tyre was a huge, huge city. It was a coastal city. It was where a lot of trade went on. And I mean, it was a big city. And this prophecy is saying that someday Tyre was going to be completely demolished, and every piece of the buildings and even down to the dust and the rocks would be thrown into the sea, and that people would cast their fishing nets on it. Well, they still cast their fishing nets on it today because it happened. God got it right again in 332 BC, which is 250 years after this prophecy in Ezekiel. Alexander the Great destroyed the city completely. He built a land bridge a half a mile out into the water and took everything from the city, including the dirt, and threw it into the sea. He made a causeway to the second part of Tyre, the island. So Tyre had a part on the mainland, and then just a little ways off out in the ocean, there was a little island, and it was also part of Tyre. So they held out on the island for a long time. It's still a peninsula today. It's still part of the landmass today, the peninsula that Alexander the Great built a half mile out into the ocean to get to the island, to destroy the rest of the people on the island. Fishermen actually cast their nets over pieces of the old city. You must understand that this was an extremely wealthy and powerful city that even Babylon attacked for 13 years and couldn't defeat. So Babylon was huge. You know, all the people that they took over, and they couldn't even defeat this spot, but Alexander the Great did. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end there, I think. I'm not sure how long this has been going now, but I think that this prophecy stuff is just amazing when the Bible can predict it. And I'm just going over fulfilled prophecies, but there's a lot of prophecies to be fulfilled in the Bible, and there's a couple that are getting pretty close. I'll talk about them a little bit too later on, but yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, how could you doubt when something can tell you the future with 100% accuracy down to the details that it does? Even a man's name before he's born, and how things will be overtaken and what state the people will be in, that they'll be drunk. Like, when everything comes true, it has to be God. How could you think that there is some other way that the future could be told in a book? And so many of them. So anyway, what we have here is the Word of God. It is God-breathed. Every single word in this book is inspired. And there's a great deal of prophecy. I was just listening to a prophecy thing today. They said that, and I've always heard it was almost a third of the Bible, but they said anywhere from 27 to 31% of the Bible has prophecy in it. So our God is great. He's mighty, and he gave us proof. This, I believe, is the best proof. Prophecy and fulfilled prophecy should get everybody's attention and make you take it very seriously. Well, this has been the Jesus Loving Logger, and I hope you enjoyed this prophecy. I'm going to have more prophecy when we come back next time. So have a good week, and I'll see you later.